and they took a concept car that was well received at Paris, and they said, we'll build it. It was their TT moment, really, wasn't it?
Then I got really grumpy, and I just said, driving properly.
And I just wonder whether there's another element to what's happened in insurances. We've kind of gone nuclear because that's good for the insurance companies.
Hello and welcome to the Car Podcast with Chris Harris and his friends. Speaking about yourself in the third person is the first sign of madness. So I've either become Arthur Scargill or I've lost the shit. So here we go. This week, a little crystal ball challenge. We did one the other week and we rather enjoyed it. And given it's our podcast, we'll talk about what we like talking about. This time, I've offered my fellow podders 7 very generous 1,000 of your sterling pounds. What they have to do is buy something that's vaguely future-proof, should go up in value, won't offend their relatives or people they share their finances with, and sadly for them, but joyously for me, it has to be French. Over to Neil Clifford, a man who I think doesn't really like French cars.
Oh, I do like French cars, actually. I do like French cars.
How many French cars do you own?
A Renault Clio.
You've got 2. You've got an Alpine.
Oh, yeah, and that. And yeah, exactly.
He doesn't know how many French cars he has.
Bloody
Yeah,
French.
and that.
Yeah. Well, I think Citroen is the coolest French brand.
Yep.
So we'll put that one to bed. And then, well, look, they're all on the up. $7,000 now means they were $3,000 about 3 years ago, and they're going to be $15,000, aren't they, in about 5 years' time? Because
all French cars that cost $7,000.
all French cars are worth more than the French cars of 3 years ago.
I think he's right. I think he's right, Mr. Cooper. I think this stuff is going up.
Oh, Mr. Cooper's squinting.
Oh no, he's got his
graph.
Tony Blair consultant hands out. For
Yeah.
those that can't see him, he's got the hands out. He's making graph shapes.
Yeah. Keep going. Keep going.
Electric cars are making the values of petrol cars go up in value because everyone's thinking, bollocks, there's no more of these cool cars anymore. So I'm going BX GTI.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And
For $7,000.
Yeah. There's one on the famous website.
Okay.
It's not about the website that we know, but another website. And $7,000. Only just though. Only just. You won't get a low miler anymore. They're into the 10s and 12s. Yeah. I'd like white because I'd like a sort of reference to that. What was the cool one? The 4x4 one?
No, the 16 valve was the cool one. That was the one that was in the advert with the Countach when he goes off to work.
There was a homologation one, though, wasn't there?
There was a
drive rally one.
Oh, that was a different thing. That was a different thing. Yeah,
but that's he's just said reference.
My reference is the white one with the 4 spots on the front, and I'd have
that's the Group B car.
The Group B car. So I'd do the reference to that white with white wheels.
Yeah.
And I think it's a Gandini car as well, isn't it?
It's a Gandini car. Yeah.
Where else are you going to get a cooler car than that for $7,000? I now challenge you all for that.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Will it make your life better?
Let me apologise for something here now, right? So one of the last things I did on Top Gear was some Christmas special thing, and I had a Citroen BX. It had the GTI engine, and it was a 4x4, and it was 3-4 years ago, and it had and it cost no money at all. And I knew it was going to get damaged in the filming, and I was mortified. I hated when we did that shit, and sure enough, it got damaged. I'd love to have kept it. It wasn't white; it was red. But the combination of the ride comfort from that hydro pneumatic suspension and the very soft seat, they know how to do a seat squab to the front.
Lovely seats in a BX.
And it was just a lovely, soothing, calming car, the like of which is not made anymore. So Neil Clifford, your Citroen BX, do you know what? I'm marking you. I'm putting 3 massive ticks next to that, and you get a come and see teacher at the end of the day for a
Can I get a smiley? Can I get a smiley sticker?
Yeah, smiley face, a biscuit, everything. Jim will fix the badge, the lot.
Is that where the teacher would write good work?
Yeah.
Is that where the teacher would write good work? We're never quite sure whether it was an O and an R in the work word.
Yeah. Ooh. Right. So let's go for Chris Cooper's had a glass of wine with his roast chicken dinner. We
Oh
can talk about
I had
no.
a beer.
He's a little bit punchy.
A little bit.
Let's go for Manish with your £7,000.
Well, I think Niels is actually pretty bloody unbeatable, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. There is only one Gandini car, and it was on my Chris Cooper like list of three, but I'm going to read one. It's the Peugeot RCZ 200 GT.
Ooh.
Interesting.
I think that's a pretty bloody cool car for 7,000 quid, and I found one for 6,999. 1.6 litre turbo, 200 horsepower, leather seats, front and back. But the only thing that made me sort of slightly catch my breath with these French cars is the fact that you don't know how they're going to be at 65,000 miles, which is what this one.
I
Sorry.
think we do.
Well, exactly. I think you know what this is going to be at 51,000 miles. But it does have the same engine, doesn't it, as the Mini Cooper S, and or a variant of it. So I think it'll be a bit squidgy. It'll be a bit, but actually the design's it's pretty elegant, except for where the front door meets the back window. There's a little curvy bit. I wish it was a straight line, but apart from that, and they go. It's a six-speed manual gearbox. I think it's £7,000. You never know.
I think it's a brave choice. There is something about the RCZ. It's probably the bravest piece of styling for a French car company in the last 15 years. And they took a concept car that was well received at Paris, and they said, "We'll build it." It was their TT moment, really, wasn't it?
Right.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
And it was a pretty brave
I give you that.
carry through of a concept design. It could have been a lot worse. So, do you know what, Manish? I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you that.
Thank you. I noticed a little bit of Mr. Cooper's usual. That was pretty good for you, Manish.
No, he's just not very sure. He's had a beer, so he's frightfully punchy. Right, come on then, Mr. C. Let's hear what you've got to say.
Well, teacher, sir, unlike the other students, I've actually read the question.
Yep.
Oh no.
Although I think I like Neil's answer.
Yeah.
In the early mid 2000s, when I was a wannabe racing driver, all the young lads who were proper racing drivers, who I was racing against, they're smoking like racing school cars, or they went to sparring. The one they all wanted was a BX.
Really?
Racing driver Rob Garoford has now driven more F1 cars, I think, than anyone.
No.
He's a McLaren's sort of go-to man. He had a BX. When we're in Spa in 03, modesty prevents me from saying our relative positions that weekend. Although the question we're going to do later on about laps for which there wasn't an onboard, it may come back then. Let's see. So
Chris,
the question said.
No, Chris, stop for 1 second. Just to let you know, we're trying to build an audience, not lose one. Just remember that, okay? Thank you.
That's a different thing, isn't it? Okay. The question said 7,000 to buy something that will appreciate in value, Manish, and make your life better.
Having a second or third car would make my life better.
So I think you might be right. So I think BX definitely would. You got to do this properly. You got to go to French websites for this. Got to go to French websites and see what the French are buying and selling to each other. I obviously found 3 or 4, but there's one winner, because I think, teacher, we can make that question, make your life better. We can make that go a little further. So 106 Rally, there are still 106 rallies on French websites, monsieur, for around about 7 or 8 grand.
Yep.
Half the price they are here. Some really nice. There's one today we saw at Bicester. We might talk about that a bit later on. I found on a British website a 306 GTI 6,
Ooh.
7 grand.
Ooh.
306
first gen
GTI
or second
6.
gen?
That's a cool car.
First gen.
First gen. What was weird about the first gen 306 GTI 6?
I didn't buy one.
Yeah. Well, no, actually.
Apart from that, tell us, teacher.
To fit the 6-speed manual gearbox into the car meant that the steering rack became asymmetrical, so it had a different turning circle left to right.
It's brilliant. But it's none of those. I thought about another one. I know you like this as well, Mr. H. At Bicester today, there was a Citroen Visa GTI.
Oh, I know.
It's lovely.
Yes, but it's not $7,000.
I know.
No way.
I know it isn't.
How good did it look?
So when I went back to the question, it said, "And make your life better."
Yep.
But is there a French car available for £7,000 that if you owned it, it would make everyone around you make their life better and they would feel better? There is.
Yep, the douche.
Oh.
The douche.
It's that.
Yeah. And you can get sort of an early 80s one, bit daggy for $7,000. Everything
better than that. 61.
How?
It said it was a 61
In France.
For €8,000. I'll send you the link.
Do you
I haven't sent money already. It might already be on the way to Nigeria. I don't know.
Do you pay
€8,000
bringing it to the UK?
In 1961.
So if you drive it through the tunnel, here's a question, and I wouldn't want to, this is hypothetical. If one was to go to France and just drive that car back to the UK, having paid $7,000 for it, and you go through the tunnel, you go through the green lane and just go home with it. I mean, how does that work?
You can.
I haven't thought that far.
No. Okay. I think that's a great choice. Although, as a man who's got a couple of these things, there is no way that is €8,000 at 1961. But I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you.
How many ticks do I get?
Three ticks, and you get a good work.
Good.
So these are very good, and the one I'm going to choose is pertinent to me and is therefore deeply selfish. I've gone to French websites as well. You have to go to, anyone listening to this, we'll put a link up now. You have to go to leboncoin.com or .fr. So the French, being the French, don't really like eBay. They've just, because they don't like anything American. So they said no to eBay, and they created their own little place, their marketplace called Le Bon Coin. And if you inquire or ask about cars with an English email address, they won't reply. So you have to get a French mate to ask the questions. It's just the most wonderfully French thing. It's pure Gallic nonsense, but all the great cars are there. So I think in answer to make your life better, I love stuff that you couldn't get in the UK. I always like, I think we're all car nerds, love having something, and you can say to people, yeah, this wasn't available in the UK. And that just makes you look like you're so resourcul. And
on the inside.
Such deep knowledge of the subject. Like, they've got Corrado G60, one of the early left-hand drive cars. They only sold the 16 valve at that point in the UK.
The steel wheels.
So I found something earlier that made me, and I'm actually having a shit day. I've had a very good morning, I've had a shit afternoon. This cheered me up no end about 10 minutes ago. One of the greatest special editions ever made was the 205 Roland Garros. You must remember that.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. The Roland Garros was a lovely car. It was a 205 XS with a very dignified alloy wheel design, green paint, and sort of creamy bolsters for the seats, and a special interior. But it had the proper 205 XS engine, 85 horsepower, twin Solex carb, which is the best engine in a 205. So 0-60, 9 and a bit seconds. They're great cars. It was a 3-door car in the UK. What I didn't realise was...
Oh.
Yes.
No.
Wait for it. I'm about to drop that mic. They did a 5-door.
Oh.
And I found one for €7,000. A 5-door Roland Garros. Now, as far as I'm aware, very few cars have the classic 205 GTI front seat with the extra bolsters, the big bolsters, and actually has rear doors. So this, for me, is quest. I will dream about that car tonight.
Sir, you're so clever, sir.
So I'm wondering.
We love your class.
And it makes your dog's life better as well.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about perfect car.
5-door Roland Garros. This is the thing. You realise that you're either losing your marbles or you're getting old when Ferrari announces that it's releasing some new hypercar or when there's another hypercar release. You don't give a monkeys, but you get very excited when you find a Peugeot that's got 2 more doors than you thought ever existed from 1991. There we go. It's a weird world.
Who can remember who Roland Garros, because that Roland Garros special edition had like tennis balls, didn't it, on the side? But actually, Roland Garros was managed.
Fighter pilot, and even cooler than that, I think he was the first fighter pilot to actually have a machine gun that could fire through the propeller. And you know how he did it? It wasn't with a timed system like the Germans invented. He did it by fitting deflectors to the
No.
propeller.
Well,
So
that's how
once in a
before they had
while, you get
deflection
a-
shooting. Yeah, they armor plated the propeller.
Talk
Yeah.
about nutty.
Sorry, he used to shoot through a propeller. That's a Wile E. Coyote sketch, isn't it?
No, in World War One, when both sides decided that rather than having a co-pilot who would have a machine gun pointing out the side, he wanted it pointing forward. Bit of a problem. There's a propeller in front of you. So the original solution was they would armor plate or steel plate the propeller, so they didn't shoot off their own propeller. And then I think it was the British who worked out some way of the interval shooting. So they work out where the crank
There's a
position
blank
was,
that
so it
basically
wouldn't
stops the
pull the
machine
trigger.
gun
So
firing.
as the thing went, brrr, it would just fire through the gaps.
If you like a little analogy, somebody said, if you imagine a windmill, the speed at which a windmill rotates, imagine throwing a stone so that you miss the big windmill blades. That's the speed of a bullet compared to the speed of a propeller.
I thought you were going to
Windy
say throw a small woodland animal through the sails of a windmill.
No,
Okay.
don't do it.
Miller could walk through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dean Miller.
Right.
Love
Let's
him.
we're moving on. We're moving on now.
Pew,
Largely because Chris
pew,
Cooper's just
Barney
made his
McGrew.
machine gun noise, which was. So I asked my learned friends here to help me have a little discussion about the UK car insurance situation. And I put lots of question marks and exclamation marks next to it. I'll open with a simple statement. I found a really helpful document, actually, which is in the House of Commons library. So it's a government document. I'm sure Manish looked at it as well. And it just says the following. Quotes for UK car insurance have risen by 82% since May 2021. Get that. I know we're used to a bit of inflation, but I don't think any part of our lives has inflated to quite the same degree. Neil Clifford, do you have anything to say, or do you even care about this subject?
Yes, I do. It was on my list as we were discussing it, if you note that. And this is part of an irregular series, actually, that we're going to be talking about why we as drivers are being ripped off to fund probably government final salary pension schemes. There you go. Insurance, road tax, speeding fines, 24 in a 20. You know how many thousands of people are getting done every day for that?
Yeah.
Petrol, car parking in local towns, and we wonder why the high street is fucked.
I think Aviva and Royal & Sun Alliance are in on this as well.
This could go on forever, this little subject, in my view. I just think it's so opaque. Frankly, it looks to me like it's desperate for a shake-up and desperate for someone to come along and be a new entry into this place. Because, you know, I never have accidents. I don't drive fast enough to have accidents. But every single year, my insurance goes up.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know why that would be the case, particularly as I haven't read that government thing, but obviously insurance companies seem to have a brilliant PR machine, because there's always a reason, a very logical reason why things have risen by 20, 30, 40%. It used to be people nicking cars and ram raiding shops, didn't it? Then just people nicking cars. I don't think many cars get nicked anymore unless you've got a Range Rover in central London, because, you know, alarms are quite good apart from Land Rover ones, or, you know, trackers and those ghost things. So I think it's all a bit of a con. And I think we should be opening this can of worms. Don't we think?
I think I agree in some areas. Some of the data doesn't support all of that, because if it did, the insurance companies would be making a load of money. But
I bet they are.
I'm not sure they are. Chris Cooper, what do you think?
Well, you know, I'm a failed management consultant.
Yep.
So one of the areas I failed in was the motor insurance marketplace in the UK. So I was actually working a little bit on this week.
Oh.
So the data is correct, whatever the government paper said. Why have insurance premiums gone up so much? To a large extent, but probably not entirely, they reflect inflation in accident crash repair costs.
Yes.
And why has that happened? I'll do that in a minute. So the reason, Neil, why your insurance costs have gone up, even though you are a superb driver, with blameless behavior and rude manners and general non-crashiness,
Yes.
it's the pooling effect of the insurance model.
Cool.
We all contributing, all insurance premiums contribute. This is the sort of the moral hazard of insurance. In pooling model, which generally speaking is what insurance is, we all share the costs of the worst behaving members of the group. That's how it works. Years ago, I worked on the British nuclear pool, which was a pool of all the nuclear businesses in the UK. So how would you possibly afford for a Chernobyl type or a 3 Mile Island type accident in the UK? Although I think this was certainly true until about 10 years ago, the British nuclear industry, unlike any other industry in the UK, in the world in nuclear, was claim free. So the nuclear pool made tons of money. So insurance companies work on what, combined operating ratio, which is here's all the money we get from the premiums, and here's all the money we spend on fixing broken cars, paying our people, blah, blah, blah. What has happened? What was that since 21 or 20? Those
21.
numbers? Okay. So since 21, a number of things, it's a perfect storm. Post-Brexit, post-COVID, supply chains have turned to shit. Ukraine as well, all those kind of things. Anybody who was buying a poshish car in 2021 would have found the delivery dates went back. Why? Because most of the VW group was using a wiring loom manufacturer, happened to be based in Ukraine. So there weren't very many coming through. The ones that were coming through presumably had bullet holes in them. So post-COVID, post-Brexit, post-Ukraine, supply chains became very, very tough. The crash repair industry in the UK suffered wage inflation, huge wage inflation, trying to hold on all the people that used to work in body shops in the UK, blah, blah, blah. But this is a bit we're going to love the most. And we kind of talked about it last week.
EVs.
There's a bit of that. We also talked about, in fact, we talked about two things last week. One is repairing EVs.
Yeah.
But the bigger factor is repairing cars with driver assistance systems fitted to them, which is now an EU mandated thing. So crash repair, if you've ever been into a body shop, I mean, they are extraordinary places because they're trying to apply the same level of manufacturing standard to a broken car that a manufacturer put into factory. It's just, you can't do it as well, quite really. So the most time consuming thing now, and it's probably added about at least half to many, if not most crash repairs, is recalibrating all those fucking driver assistance systems. That has added a huge amount to the time taken in a body shop to get. So you can fix it all, do everything, but unless you recalibrate all those systems and all the technology required. So for a perfect storm set of reasons, post-COVID, post-Brexit, post-Ukraine, all the inflation has affected all of them, but in particular, the technology in cars, be it exotic materials, how complex they are, manufacturers protecting their right. So if your beautiful Bentley is broken, or even your lovely Ford is broken, you probably could get some pattern parts, some copy parts, which are 40% of the price of an insurer's original part. But they bully the insurers into using OEM parts, original equipment manufacturer parts. All of those things say that the cost of an average repair, so, and when I was doing this a few years ago, an average repair in the UK took about 9.5, 10 hours across little car parking dings to massive smashes on the motorway. I could spend all day talking about it, so I'm going to stop there to say there has been an enormous inflation in every aspect of what I made it, but some of it is self-inflicted by all those people that Neil talks about because of the driver assistance systems and the silly technology that are mandated has just made the repair time and cost just go whoosh. As a result of that, car makers are losing money. RSA, the insurance company, used to be number 2 or 3 in UK. Now they're 16th because they said, we can't make any money out of car insurance. Direct Line, they're still in there. Aviva, they're still in there. Lots of other smaller ones. But there has been unbelievable inflation in crash repair costs.
Thank you, Chris. That was a very, very detailed and considered answer. And I love the fact that you said, I will stop talking now, and carried on talking for another 2 minutes. before I ask Manish about this, I want to just add two things. I want to acknowledge the fact that the old groupings, we used to love groups, didn't we? There was group 1 to 5, then there was group 1 to 12, then there was group 1 to 20. I didn't realize it got to group 50 recently.
It's 50 now.
But when you get old, you don't care about groups. I remember, who remembers the heady days of an AXGT being group 8, whereas a 205 GTI was group 15? I always remember thinking. So that's now moving to a new model called VRR, Vehicle Risk Rating.
Oh.
This vehicle risk rating uses 1,000 data points. So effectively, it's a knowledge model. Makes sense. Anyhow, it has burped one of the greatest quotations I've read this year. How about this for some management speak? This is Thatcham speaking about this VR.
They're the industry body who does all the stuff on crash repair.
Thatcham, I'm not taking. Thatcham it's a not-for-profit organisation that has done an awful lot to help motoring become safer. So I'm not deriding them. However, they might need to speak to their press office about this. VRR offers insurers more granular insights into vehicle risks while supporting the Thatcham research mission to enhance safe, secure, and sustainable mobility. What does that mean?
I was going to say,
what's their margins up?
I mean, what it will do is, and this is the creeping thing, I think that we're all guessing at, is the pooling effect. It's for everybody. Will start to restrict, which is, I say it's for everybody. I don't like the look of you. Exactly. I just want the nice people.
That's the scary thing about the word granular, in that they will spot your little grain, and your grain will either be priced out of the market, or it just won't be insured, and that's quite scary. And the same thing's happening in health.
Oh, so I thought granular was like bread or something.
Granular, you have a load of data which is wishy-washy, and these guys find the little grains. Yeah. I was just going to add literally a tiny anecdote. When I took a year off before I went to university, and you're moving something out of your camera.
I just got a text message off Neil. I've got a back channel text message that says, "You have a black thing hanging down on your screen."
You did actually. It's gone. I took a year off and I worked for the Southern Electricity Board's transport department because they just put a computer in. It was great. Those were those daisy wheel printer times, and the computer paper was green and white.
So you didn't go and sit on a beach in Indonesia?
No, I didn't.
Or go skiing in Corsh? You did what?
First 6 months I worked in I earned some money. I spent 6 months in the computerized transport department of the Southern Electricity Board in Basingstoke. And I actually had a fantastic time. I really enjoyed myself. And one of my jobs had to do everything from sort of insuring cars to going and getting the tax discs every month and logging their miles. But one of the jobs I had to do was to read and then photocopy and send on all the insurance claims for a fleet of something like 400 cars. There were things like, a deer ran into a car, writing it off, or you'd get a little dink, and people would draw what had happened. And the reason why I'm saying all of this was it was all incredibly personal. I remember reading these things, having to type them up because they were all handwritten, passing them on to the managers. Ultimately, claims would be made and processed. And I think a little bit like everything else, your 1,000 data points have taken all of this over. And I think the really desperately sad thing is if you've got a business that makes a margin of 1% and your turnover is £1 million a year, you know what you're earning. If you've got a business that makes £1 billion a year and your turnover is and your profit's 1%, then you're making a lot more money. And I just wonder whether there's another element to what's happened in insurances. We've kind of gone nuclear because that's good for the insurance companies. Why would you want to really scrutinize an accident claim? I mean, what you've got to do is just get defensive and say, look, why don't we all gang up and all pay everything? Just have a very low threshold of paying things off. And it just means the insurance premiums go up and up and up and up and up. And that's what I think we've gone into, a kind of financial nuclear war whereby it's just better for your company to pay and charge and pay.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Either way, renewal day isn't pleasant. It really isn't. You know,
Yeah.
and it's getting worse and worse and worse. I have to admit. I agree. Next question. What skill would you insist was taught and examined for all new drivers that currently isn't? Neil Clifford.
Well, you know this place because you've been there. Salvino, which is a ramshackle group of ADHD people at 5:30 in the morning in Camden. One of those lovely people that joined me for coffee is called Ralph. And Ralph is a BSM driving instructor. So I messaged Ralph a couple of hours ago because we're on a Sunday night, so we've only had the agenda about 2 hours. Ralph, I've got a question for you. And I'm doing a podcast this afternoon, so please answer quite quickly.
He said, I sent a text like this today.
Yeah. The question is, what things should young people be taught as part of their driving test that would help them in their skills in driving a car? Because, of course, I could have made it up, like be polite, obey the lanes, wave your hand, all the things we talk about. He says, this is Ralph, who's been a driving instructor for 22 years, and in fact is teaching my son at the moment, and in fact is just about to teach Manish's son.
We like Ralph.
Yeah, he's cool. He's cool. In my opinion, youngsters should be told that when you pass your test, you are still very much a beginner in driving a car, and you've got to adapt to different cars and situations. So you need to take at least 2 years of learning after you've passed your test to get in any way confident, which I think is very good advice from Ralph. How we do that, how we construct that, because of course no one wants to have that green, whatever it is,
P,
you know, because that's like an L on a motorbike, isn't it? You don't want to be that dickhead with the P or the L or whatever. You want to get going, don't you? You want to pick up your girlfriend, and you don't want the P on the back. You want to look cool straight away. But of course, it should be the beginning of learning to drive, not the end, I suppose, is what Ralph is saying.
Well, I think that's brilliant. My driving instructor, Jim, said exactly the same thing to me when I started learning to drive about 10 years ago. Obviously not. But he said exactly the same thing. That's why I ended up doing, I mentioned it last week, we talked about something, the Institute of Advanced Motorists driving test.
Oh,
I think Ralph is a man of great stature and wisdom for our world. I think that's a really good one.
And by the way, we are doing DJ style links from Radio 2 here because it could mean that your insurance would go down if you passed your advanced driving. Should it?
Yes. I got too many points on mine, so it kind of rather equaled out a bit. But it's good for those black boxes. Yeah, because it just teaches you stuff.
Chris Cooper, what do you think?
Well, I was going to put a handbrake turn. But I'm not sure that qualifies. Then I got really grumpy. And I just said, driving properly. But then the boy said to me, it's reversing, Dad. I said, yeah, but you must, do you do the reversing around? I said, well, we do, because they passed their test 2 years ago now, just over 2 years ago. So it's kind of quite current. What you guys are going through, the boys and I went through a couple of years ago. Boys and Lynn and I went through a couple of years ago. And they don't do the reversing round a corner thing that we used to do. They do reversing into a car park spot. But this is the interesting bit. I'd be interested, Ralph, when you next see Ralph, ask him whether I got this right.
Tomorrow morning.
Because he said, both boys said, the problem is in the current driving test scoring regime, it's all a numbers game. You can have as many minors as your heart's content. You have one major, you're out. You can have one major and no minors, and you're out. Okay. No majors, and he said, if you cock up the reversing, it's a minor. So instructors don't really concentrate on it. Instructors are there now. I say this is great. Ralph clearly isn't, and I'm sure lots of them aren't. And I'd like to hear from driving instructors and others as well, because I'm sure there are lots of Ralphs out there. But it was clear particularly if you look at the stats of all the driving centres across the UK. You think about half. We always thought about half of tests are a failed pass. There are some parts of the UK where that stat is 90% pass, and some parts of the UK, Exeter, well, my boys learned to drive, where it's about 25%. So clearly, there's some variations going on. So reversing is not really prioritised now in the driving test. And Neil, you must find it in your lane, and Manish, you guys live in towns, you must find it. We find it here in the lane at the farm. People can't reverse. It's not because they're being rude, although some of them are. They just can't. The number of times in the lane here, I have to get out, little jaunty, little hop along and smile on my face saying, don't worry, there's a passing space just behind you. The one behind me is about 6 miles down. There's 20 cars behind me. I'll just reverse it for you and say, oh, thank you. Would you? Reversing.
We normally see that here on school runs, and
Exactly.
It's normally 2 Range Rovers toe to toe,
Yeah.
and neither is
in those muddy, rock-strewn streets of North London.
Exactly.
And I can confirm Chris Cooper is a very, very good reverser. I've got lots of onboard of the Nurburgring.
The barriers is really good.
It's really tricky to find reverse gear on that car.
You have to pull that lever, and then for the extraction reverse. God, he was good at that. Right. So, Manish, what would you have?
I once have only ever been pulled up once for speeding. There was a good reason for it, and I chose to go to the instruction course day. And I have to say that was one of the most educational days of my life. And I said at the end of that to the 2 policemen who took it, I think everybody who passes their driving test should come and do this for a day. And I genuinely believe that. There were all kinds of absolute bits of gold about driving. And the big thing that the policemen were trying to get across is that it's all about control. And it's all about you putting yourself in a situation that's not going to cause any damage or harm to yourself or anyone else. And I came out of that, and it was like a bunch of mini epiphanies. Every single thing, like look at all of these. They have that beautiful observation thing. You have a road, and there's an avenue of trees, and there are people and women with prams in this photo. And it sounds stupid. You have to say, just name all the hazards. And finally, someone said, "What about the trees?" And it was such a good point. He said, you're quite right. In an ideal world, you just cut all of those trees down. Of course, we can't do that. But I came away from that day thinking, if I was 17 and had just done my driving test and spent a day with 2 policemen going through what real driving is like in that much detail, I'd come out an infinitely more cautious driver.
Is that one of those training film things where you're allowed to machine gun the hazards? Is it one of those?
No.
How many beers was it over dinner?
It was literally 1 small beer.
Dear me.
German. It was a Pilsner. It was quite strong.
We call that a Bernie, 1 small beer. That's what he always has for lunch.
Here we go.
You.
Me. Right.
Yeah, you.
So I think I agree with Manish. First time I did a speed awareness course, the bit that really stuck me was the argument for 20 miles an hour in urban situations. The exponential nature of the risk to life,
speed and energy
between 20 and 30 miles an hour was pretty, and I had to believe the data, but it's pretty compelling. The damage done to a human body at 30 miles an hour is something more severe. So, and I think they are thought provoking. The thing I would like to teach young people or new drivers, it's difficult to pin down. I think this description from Ralph of the next 2 years learning to drive is so right, but so correct. One learns how to pass a driving test, but you don't learn how to drive. Anything you do in life that's complicated, you get better at it over time. Yeah. And driving is arguably the most impressive thing that human beings do. I see people who I know are really profoundly incapable human beings, and they get in cars and they can judge 30 miles an hour with a gap, and they don't hit their wing mirrors. The motor skills that we all demonstrate just controlling a vehicle are really impressive. Even unimpressive driving is actually impressive. So but you don't, you have to learn how to do it. So I think that maybe the 2-year probation thing is a great idea, but how do you police that? And you're quite right. You can't put a green P on a car. It's just not fair. But
when I was, sorry, I was going to say, when I passed my final medical exams, 6 years of training, I walked onto the ward, and I remember the ward sister 3 months later when I was leaving saying, you walked onto the ward, you'd obviously done your exams, and like all junior doctors, you've done your exams, so you think you're a doctor. And she said, the way you strode up to the nurse's station, you sat down, and we just thought, oh no, this is it. He really thinks he's a hot shot. She said, I've been doing this. She was lovely.
Said the man who thought the car that was like him was an Alfa 33 Stradale. We can all picture the scene as you approach the nurse's desk.
You're quite right. So apparently the first thing I did, and I think this illustrates it in a slightly tangential way, is I opened the very first drug chart I had, and I had to rewrite this drug chart. And I looked up and I said to the nearest nurse, does anyone know the dose of paracetamol? Like that. Literally, that was my first question. And they just went, oh, okay, we'll be all right with this. And I think there is that thing. You're just saying, passing an exam and doing stuff for real are two interdependent, related, but different skills. And
the real issue now for young drivers, I've got one, and I've got another one about to become one, is that driving on the road is much more complicated than when we started. There's so much more that you've got to look out for, be it just other road users. It's busier. There's so much going on. There are speed cameras everywhere you go. There's basically a mousetrap that's trying to bite your feet, and
that's true,
anything you do is fraught with a risk or a punishment. That's the worst thing you can do to a new driver. You make them nervous. They make mistakes. So what I'd like to do is try and raise young people's horizons so they look around themselves. It's peripheral vision. How do you test peripheral awareness? Because they become so scared of the speed camera and everything else, they don't see the granny walking across the road because they're petrified. Their shoulders are tight. And I don't know how you test it, but I just would love people to feel less scared, more relaxed, and have the ability to look up more and be interested in their surroundings. That's another thing as well. If you're not interested, I often say when I'm driving with my son, I go, what's that behind us? Is that a GTR or a GT? And I said, what was that over there? Do you see the wheels on that? If you're interested in your environment, then you're paying attention, aren't you?
Yes,
if you're just locked in, again, how on earth you test this stuff, I don't know. But if you want to become better at it, you've got to have an interest in it, haven't you?
And you've got to take pride in it.
Yeah,
yeah. And it sounds like an old-fashioned kind of thing to say, and I sort of say that with a bit of trepidation. But I think if and I've said it to boys when they were going through learning and they found things difficult. I said, look, if you just take pride in it, you will always get better because you'll always think you can do better. Perfection is a really, really hard thing to achieve. You might never do it. If you have the pride to say, I want to do better, then I think you're right. That sort of, Ralph is, those are the words of the day from Ralph. They were really good.
Yeah, I put my kids through some driving instruction. I've got 3 kids, so 2 of them have passed the test, up at Millbrook with a guy called Colin Hode, who's he's the only guy who teaches at Millbrook. And to do a couple of days with him, I know it's a bit extravagant, frankly. Most people can't bloody afford it. So I'm sounding like a bit of a tosser, but teaching how to handle a skid, how to handle a car, and about ABS and driving fast through the cones and fast speed braking and all of that. I'm lucky that I could afford for them to do it, and I've made them do it. And actually, they have a very joyful, very enjoyable day.
Yeah,
because we all get in that situation, don't we? When we're young, and your car's a bit out of control, and it's a bit icy, or it's a bit rainy, and you're being a bit of a twat or whatever. It's quite good to know maybe a little bit of what to do.
Do they say older drivers?
Yeah, well, for sure. I still need a little bit of
send me his number.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yes, moving on.
If you could watch one lap of onboard footage, and this could actually be a circuit or it could be rally, that doesn't exist, what would it be? I quite like this one. I'm secretly quite proud of this one. Manish, what would it be?
Oh, I really had to think about this.
I bet you didn't. There's an obvious one you're going to pick.
Yes, I think I know which one Manish is going to pick.
There's an obvious one.
It was a British racing circuit.
No,
It wasn't.
Oh, okay, go on then.
No, I tell you what I would love to have is the very last lap of Estoril 1985 onboard Senna's Lotus. It was his first win. And I've seen, I mean, the camera angles were terrible because it was raining so hard, even at the end. But what he does is he does this amazing lap. He practically lapped everyone. This is a car with gears. This is a car with
H pattern.
Exactly, with a proper Renault turbo engine in the rain, and all you can see from the outside is as he wins, he undoes his seatbelts, and he's out of the car. He's out of the car doing this, and it's amazing that he controls it. And in the background, I think it's either Alain Prost or Nigel. No, it's Nigel Mansell spins off on the straight, literally on the straight, right behind him, having been lapped. And to be inside that car when Senna wins his first race, and also I'd love to have the audio. If they have that, can you imagine what that audio is? Because his English was not so good as it was, 5 years later. Just that.
Yeah.
That's all you do. It would be brilliant. It would be brilliant. I would love to have seen that last lap.
Neil Clifford.
I'm a bit of a stuck record on this because anything even marginally similar to a question like this, I always answer the same bloody thing. So I apologise in advance.
I know what it is.
The Sterling Moss Mini Milia 1955. I mean, talk about Mr. fucking predictable. But it would be a 10-hour, 7-minute and 48-second recording. It could also be, you could enjoy it for years, couldn't you? Driving 170 miles an hour, planes can't keep up with you. Old Dennis Jenkinson with his little thing sat next to you all the way from Brescia to Rome and back again. That's all. I wouldn't need Netflix, BBC, ITV, any of that shit. I wouldn't need any. Just that'd do me for the rest of my life. Brilliant, wouldn't it?
Sorry, what did you say?
I said Chris Cooper. That's your name.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked me this question. So I went looking through all my old timesheets. No, I didn't do that. So I didn't do that. I thought, Manish, you were going to say Senna's pole lap at Monaco in '88, which wasn't onboarded.
Exactly, it wasn't onboarded.
It wasn't onboarded, but for '85 and Estoril in the rain, that's probably even better. It's quite hard to walk past Stefan Belof's pole time at the ring in '83.
Yeah.
When he was 5 seconds faster, he did a 6:11.13. He was 5 seconds faster. We'll put it on the like we did last week videos. We're going to do music this week, I think, aren't we? But we'll put it on. There's a little clip I found today of just in by the T13. You ring nerds like us will know where T13 is. It's a bit where the old circuit and the new one join, and you can just see in the background the new circuit construction going on. It was the last big race on the Nordschleife before the GP. In fact, the year before that funny 190E 2.316 race, Manish, you talked about last week.
Well, what was he driving? What was Beloff driving in that race?
The 956.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Where your feet were in front of the front wheel line. And there's a bit of footage when he comes back into the pits at the end of that, where Jochen Mass, his teammate, was like, this guy's a fucking alien. And as he gets out of the Beloff gets out of the cockpit, there's a shot looking over his shoulder, and there's a mechanic looking at him as he gets in. And you watch the mechanic's eyes, and the mechanic is watching Beloff, and he's just waiting to catch his eyes because he's got this look of surreal bewilderment on his face, like, do you realize what you've just done? And Beloff looks at him, and he just nods. And there's a slap of Norbert Singer, a quite young-looking Norbert Singer, the god of Porsche Motorsport, looking there thinking, I can't believe what we've just seen. And that is that. But that's not the one I've chosen, because I think there's somebody even braver. And the person that's even braver, who not everyone will know about, is the man sitting in that car.
Mark Donoghue.
Mark Donoghue. So we all know what that car is. That is possibly the greatest racing car ever made, 91730 Porsche. It killed Can-Am in 1973.
Yeah.
This was the car that in qualifying trim had just under 1,500 horsepower. It weighed 800 kilos. It was made from spit and sawdust, basically, tubes and
unicorn bones.
Unicorn bones.
Yeah.
It had a 400 litre, well, actually, it had two 200 litre fuel tanks.
No.
One down his left leg, one down his right leg. If he had a shunt in that, he wouldn't have burnt to death, he'd have drowned. And he wasn't a slow driver. He died very sadly, I think in a Penske the following year in F1. Very, very sad, that horrible period. So he won 13 of the 16 rounds or heats in that 73 year. But the one I'd like to have seen, Cameron and I were talking about it today. In fact, Cameron, who loves this stuff, if you ask my boys, they'd say all racing cars should only be allowed to be like that.
Yeah.
Formula One note. Elkhart Lake, Road America. Those are American road circuits. They're just all unbelievably awesome. We need to go and do a little road trip there and a little podcast in one day.
Should.
Elkhart Lake, he was first person to ever drive under, his pole lap was 1:57, never gone under 2 minutes. No, never gone 2 minutes. 30 years later, a Ferrari 333, that wonderful V-tail Ferrari race car, was still a second a lap slower than that 9:17.30. So Mark Donoghue driving that 9:17.30, bathing, probably wouldn't have had that much fuel in quali, but you get the picture. A car that would fall apart if you just looked at it funny. Possibly one of the bravest things a man's ever done, anyone's ever done in a car. I would have liked to have seen that on board.
These are great answers. I have to say, I've got all the same ones. I think a driver's eye view of either of Arnoux and Villeneuve when they had their famous dust that'd be quite good.
That's even better.
That would be quite good.
That's a good one.
You need four laps for that to really enjoy that.
Yeah, and it makes you realise how there's a large chunk of the canon that's missing. We're so lucky with these driver's eye views as a whole, but maybe that adds to the mystery that all we have is autosport descriptions and exterior views and anecdotal storytelling. So I'm going to go for, I had 722 obviously as well. That was a bit annoying. There's an event that Neil's very fond of, and I got to give his book back, I know this, called the Targa Florio. And I think there's a real lack of onboard footage of the Targa.
There is, that's true.
There's some out there, but not much. So I'm going to take Gis van Lennep in that amazing looking RSR 2.8 with the weird spoiler 1973. Yeah. I think it'd be, because what would you see? You'd see women going to church, dogs, cats, children getting out of the way of racing cars. It was a madhouse, wasn't it?
Yeah. Donkeys.
Yeah, donkeys. So I'm gonna say Van Lennep in RSR with the martini colours. You wouldn't see
Is that with the Mary Stewart spoiler at the back?
Yeah, it's got the weird sort of exactly that. So that's what I'd probably go for.
Well, it finished. That's almost the end of the term, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was the last ever one. 73.
Same as Can-Am, 73.
Yeah, 73 was the last one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to a two-car garage, which was set by one of my learned podders. I won't say which one. Excuse me while I bring it up and put my goggles on. It's late, you know. You're a middle-aged
really
man.
Good. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You're a middle-aged man of some means, and you've owned quite a few cars over the years. So this is not me, obviously. This was set by Manish, by the way. You've been thrilled with some, disappointed by others, but two cars have left you feeling that with a little work, they could have hit the bullseye. They just didn't at the time. You know an amazing bloke who can take any car and tinker with anything, from the engine to the smallest thing on the body. He can even fix electronics. His son runs an amazing coach trimmer. Mm-hmm. So, two cars from the past. What are they? And what are you going to do to make them perfect? No budget. We love that bit. But don't be a complete investment wanker or tech bro. So this is an open-ended one, but it's quite indulgent. So I'm going to start with Neil Clifford.
Well, I think we're talking about our lovely Kevin and Rocky, aren't we, really? Bless them. Now, Kevin does do a Dino because I had a Dino, and I think it's one of the 10 prettiest cars in the world. But even for me, it's a bit gutless. Which that's saying something, when I thought a Fiat 131 Mirafiori was quite fast. But I think the Dino, modding a Dino, which Kevin does, but what I would maintain the V6. I know Kevin does a brilliant job with putting a V8 in it from a 308 or 328 or whatever.
Is that
But
fit?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, you should Google it. It's mega. It's mega. Makes them for rich Americans. They're fantastic. But I would keep a V6 in it. I don't know. Let's say a Dino's probably 200 horsepower or something, or 240 or something. You want like 350. It probably isn't. It's probably 200.
On a good day.
Yeah, on a good day. Yeah. You want 300 or 320, don't you? In like a really Motec, I don't know, Japanese tuned, sort of cool little V6, whatever that would be. You'd want all of the right damping. You'd want ceramic brakes. I wouldn't have a GTS, even though I had a GTS. I regretted that. I'd have the GT. I wouldn't have the little Targa roof. I'd have it in non-metallic dark red, Rosso Barchetta. I'd have it in tan leather, obviously with the Daytona seats and the little flares and all that. So flares and chairs. And I think that would be a super cool car, all, seam welded and all the shit that you'd have to do so it would feel modern, but it would look prettier than any car. And then my second car, our friend Gordon Murray has already done this. So I'm nicking really from Gordon Murray. But my mum's favourite car, my first car, was a Mark I Escort. And actually, when you see them now, in two-door guys, not four-door guys. My mum was four-door. Very rare car from Hendy Lennox in Fareham, but I think the two-door looks better than a four-door. It's a fucking great looking car.
It is.
It looks like a
steel wheel hubcaps.
Oh, and
chrome ones, yeah.
And there's no flies on Gordon Murray, and he's done it. He's resto modded with those super cool guys. He's done like a Singer stroke Alphaholics. It's got a super tuned twin cam, 250 brake horsepower. He's had it all seam welded, probably with, carbon fiber weld. It's probably cost him £500,000 because he sold his F1, so he got a load of money anyway. You want a really cool little interior. His is in white, which I think is mega cool because it's sort of super low key,
very low key,
like the twin cam. So Mark I Escort, Alphaholic, and I'd get Kevin to do me a Dino GT, but keep it V6.
Okay, Manish, what are you going for?
Oh gosh, so what inspired me here was this idea that Neil says that when you own a car, the most important thing is to look good in it. I also think the second most important thing is not to break down in it all the time.
Yeah.
And I've always been in love with Jaguar XJSs. I just think there's something really rather wonderful about those cars, but every single thing you read about them, talk about a car that was sort of completely underdeveloped when it was created and stayed kind of underdeveloped, but possibly until the very, very last ones were out. But I thought the prettiest ones for me were the first Ford Jaguars, where they replaced that little plastic bit at the back by the buttresses with that sort of extra bit of glass. And I rather like that. Look, I like the buttresses too. So I would love to get, actually there was somebody I found on a Jaguar forum who basically resto modded his own XJS from 1992. And he wrote, for me, it was a kind of excuse to get back to getting my hands dirty, as I had nothing to do maintenance-wise on the modern XJ. There were times when I was ready to throw in the towel, but in those dark times, this forum actually pulled me through. I think if you really keep on top of the maintenance, the XJS can be a reliable car.
Yeah.
Well, just as reliable as any 20-year-old second, third, fourth-hand car can be, because they did pass through lots of hands. So it would be wonderful to get somebody who could, and it sounds like the wiring is the worst thing in that car, who could really take that car apart electrically, put it back together again. I mean, I read about this awful thing called a Morelli failure. I had no idea
That
they
sounds
do that.
bad.
Yes.
So apparently the rotor means that one of your banks of cylinders don't ignite. They flood the catalytic converter with neat petrol, basically, and your cat catches fire as
Are
you're
you
driving.
are you having a V12? What's engine
Yeah,
is
it
it?
would definitely be a V12.
Yeah,
It would
yeah.
definitely be a V12. So I think a beautiful rest modded
Coupe.
XJS
Coupe.
V12.
Yeah.
And the other one, it's a car that actually I don't think there's much wrong with it. There's just one aesthetic modification. I think the Maserati Merak SS is a very, very pretty car. My problem is that it doesn't have buttresses. It has what looks like two bits of fiberglass ruler. It starts at the back of the cabin. It ends up on the tail. Do you know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
And I would get somebody to basically put a little curve on those and have glass down the side. That's all I would do to my Merak.
Merak, although really you want a Borer.
No, I know you do,
I
but
was
the
going to say
Merak,
a Merak. You think it's going to be cheaper, but actually it's a rich man's Bora.
it's a, it's
You're going to spend more money
I've
on
seen
it.
them.
Although
I
Bora's better.
love Boras. The Meraks, if anything, even prettier. So
It's a silly man's Borer.
Yeah. I followed that Gordon Murray Mark 1 Escort. I remember following it into Goodwood for a members meeting a couple of years ago before I knew what it was or it was his.
Yes.
I remember following it in that back way. You go through Lavant Village and sort of come along the north side of the airfield and come in that way. I remember thinking, it just caught my eye ever so sort of slowly. I thought, that's a pretty thing. It's been beautifully remade. And just the way it carved, I thought, it looks got a bit of stance on it. And it just looked special. And I saw it, it was when he must have been one of those governors. You have that funny little car park.
Yep.
Just on the inside, right on the inside. Yep. And I saw it parked and a little wooden sign behind it said Murray G. Esquire. And I thought, okay, I completely understand what that thing was. It's beautiful, really, really classy.
There's a load of YouTube on it. Great interviews.
Okay. We should put a link to that up. We should put a link on this week.
It's really good.
Yeah.
What's your two-car garage, Chris?
So these two chums of yours, I really like this one, man. What are the names again?
Kevin is the dad, and Rocky is the son.
Okay, so Kevin and Rocky. Okay, I think they're going to have a sit down and think about what I'm going to ask them to do.
Genius,
because my first car is an Aston Martin DB9 convertible.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought about what we talked about last week, and I think we're all right. But I saw one today when we're at Bicester. I just say I think all of us, apart from you mentioned them, we need to all go to the next one in January. Robert Denton was there, and I said we need to say, because Robert's a lovely man who takes photographs and has wonderful stuff on Instagram. So I said we'd say, Robert, it's lovely to see you today. What would they need to do to a DB9 convertible? They need to make it slightly bigger so I could fit it. And I think the way they could do that, and I thought this at the time, and I remember asking the dealer, and they looked a bit at me. I said, if you took some of the stuffing and the seat out of the seat, I'd sit lower and slightly further back, and that would be perfect. I have a bit more under my thighs. I'm not asking you to rebuild the car. It's mainly in the seat and the runners. So they'd have to do that. They'd have to somehow make it a lot stiffer torsionally. That's probably not just fiddling with the seats or the trim, even with that incredible strength of modern corduroy that you see in so many cars these days. It's the material of the future. It's coming back.
Yeah.
Mr. Harris will say something about that, I'm sure, in a moment. I want it to be slightly stiffer. I'd want probably half a ton of weight taken out of it, so they could make the spring rate a bit softer and a bit more camber. So just a little bit more, and immediately it was a bit more centering and a little bit more weight just off center. If they could do that and they weren't completely blown away, I'd have that. The other one I think would be slightly easier. It's a 2011 W212 E63 estate, the one with the 156 engine, 6.2 normally aspirated, not the turbo. So it's a pre-facelift of the 212 era, 2010, 2011. I really love that car. but it just wasn't quite nice enough inside,
Ah.
and it wasn't quite quiet enough. And the secondary ride could have been slightly less tetchy and slightly less sort of noisy and bumpy. But I reckon that car with a little bit of titivation, those two cars, I'm going to go get them, ask them.
Yeah, Kevin.
I might ask them first before I get them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. I thought this is a good one because if I looked at the global question that was being asked, it was it potentially name a car that was so close to being good, but just wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
Or was it just make your own sleeper, have it away?
I think it was both, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've all felt. I mean, it was like that XJS. It should have been a perfect car, and it just was not a perfect car. And it got closer and closer, but it never really got there. And I think someone can do that now.
Yeah,
That's so beautiful.
So I would say I've said this a few times, and I've mentioned it so many times on various podcasts that people have contacted me and offered to make this car for me, but I'll do it again. W124 500E with an M156 V8 in it, and black on the outside, and I'd probably clear glass, and for some reason I'd have a dark green corduroy interior.
Beautiful.
I'm very keen to investigate this corduroy material, and you never know, I might have a go at it at some point. The next one,
Chris, what happens if you're wearing corduroy and you sit in corduroy? Is it like Velcro? Can you just not get out of the seat?
Yeah, potentially, or maybe something subatomic happens. I don't know. Does the world end? There's just a hole opens up. So the other one, there's one car, and I think this is the other question that's being posed: is choose something that just looks amazing, and then we'll make it drive properly.
Yes,
or even half decent.
There's one car that from the rear gives me a right knee wobbler, and that is the Di Tommaso Longchamp.
Oh,
Yeah.
That weird little sort of two-door saloon car thing that's so right from the rear. It's got these massive wide arch extensions. I just think it's a front-engine rear-wheel drive car. Can you just get me? I don't know if it's got a transact in it or not, but according to what it needs, let's have a BMW twin-turbo V8 of an M5, make it do 160 odd, accelerate like a stab rat, and it's going to look like a Di Tommaso Longchamp. Interior, I'm probably going to go for corduroy again. I just think it is the material of the future.
Just for change.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a corduroy Longchamp.
What colour corduroy and what colour exterior on your Longchamp?
I'll tell you what it'd be. It would be a creamy beige on the outside with a dark brown corduroy inside. Is what it would be.
Yeah.
So it'd be like the top bit of a gold top pint of milk back in 1982. That slightly sort of creamy beige.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
The birds used to nick it.
It'd be like an upside down creme brulee, wouldn't it?
You know what? Exactly would. If only you'd been that sharp at the
It could be
beginning.
the De Tommaso creme brulee.
I'll catch up.
Tommaso brulee.
Longchamp. I think the Longchamp looks good all round.
It's an amazing looking car, isn't it?
Great car.
It's just. We'll put a picture up. It's
So let's do some music before we leave. There was a film I watched on a plane recently about a load of kids that don't get to go home at Christmas time in America, and it won lots of awards. I can't remember the name of the film.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, and
Mid
there's a
80s sort of thing.
yeah, it's quite touching in places. And I can't remember the name of it, but there we go. There was a piece of music in a sort of montage scene that really just, at altitude, you get so bloody emotional. And it's a song by Labi Siffre called Crying, Laughing, Loving. And it's sad, but it's so sad, it almost allows you to talk to yourself. And I think it's a really good driving track. I listen to it late at night in the car, and I find it very soothing. So it's a late at night driving track, but it's beautiful. His voice is stunning. Manish.
I actually shared this with you, but not with our listeners 10 days ago. It's on the remastered Steve McQueen film, and it's the first lap from Le Mans. It's a fantastic bit of 60s, 70s craziness. Flutes, guitars, choir. Da-da. It's great.
What's it called?
Task.
It's called
Right,
First Lap from the
Wait, drop the choir in there.
Yeah.
Neil Clifford.
I've got a playlist called Songs, and it's got like 2,000. I didn't know what to call it, songs, and it's just for driving. And I just went through that quickly tonight. And what song? There's millions of them that just it's songs that make your hair, like you rubbed a balloon on your head. You know that feeling
Yeah.
when you're driving. And randomly, I chose Red Hill Mining Town U2.
Oh yes.
That sounds cool.
A lovely, lovely. Gives you that feeling. Yeah.
Chris Cooper.
We have a little tin in the cupboard in the kitchen. It's got biscuits written on it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Yeah. If you're a kid of the 80s, like we are, like some of us are, you're not really, are you, Mr. H? I think the rest of us are. There's so much from the 80s when we were teenagers that is just wonderful to listen to in a car now. And it's something I've been listening. When I was sort of in the office earlier, this is Sunday evening, we're doing this, after a very, very lovely roast chicken late lunch that Lynn cooked for us after we come back from Bicester, which was a lovely trip, and seeing lots of lovely people today who were very kind about our little podcast. Echo and the Bunnymen, The Killing Moon.
Oh, what a song.
What a banging tune. So
Ian McCulloch.
I've got to drive down to Swindon late morning tomorrow, probably in the pouring rain. And I thought about listening this evening. I thought in the pouring rain, that would just keep you going. When I was looking at on YouTube, this is for many of us, this sums up the mid 80s or growing up in the 80s, just what it felt like in your head. Somebody 5 years ago on YouTube, when this lovely song was posted by somebody, I can't even spell or pronounce what they said, I remember listening to this when I was cycling in the early morning and an aircraft engine fell on my house. If you were in the mid 80s, that's exactly how it felt. So Echo and the Bunnymen, The Killing Moon.
Okay, on that bombshell, I'll reiterate what Chris just said. For those of us that were at Bicester, thank you for everyone that come up and said hello. Always come and say hello. Always tell us whether it's good or bad, what annoys you, what you think is good and great and not so great. And we will almost certainly do nothing about your criticisms because we're like that. But thank you for tuning in, and we hope to bore you again next week. Thank you, Manish, Neil, and Chris. Bye-bye.